The German submarine program in the early 1900s developed against the backdrop of a general fleet expansion under Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz's risk theory. This strategy prioritized surface ships, but due to growing tensions with Britain, U-boats for coastal defense were reluctantly added. The initial steps were shaped by foreign developments. In 1903, the British Royal Navy commissioned 5 Holland-class submarines from Vickers. This demonstrated their real submerged capabilities and prompted the Germans to observe and experiment. At the same time, competing designs by American inventor Simon Lake spurred private sector innovation, which indirectly pushed German shipyards to invest despite official skepticism. The Tirpitz program, officially approved in 1897, allocated limited resources to submarines. They were seen merely as a supplement to battleships rather than a main weapon. However, this is exactly what allowed technology to gradually develop at private and imperial shipyards. Germany's own program began rather modestly with the U-boat U-1. It was built at the Krupp shipyard in Kiel and commissioned in December 1906 as a single test boat with a gasoline engine. The cramped hull and unstable fuel system exposed all the risks of early gasoline engines. This forced subsequent designers to switch to kerosene and later to the diesel engines used in following classes. By the time the U-13 class was ordered, about a dozen boats had already entered service. This gave German engineers a growing, though still limited, practical experience to build upon. The type U-13 class, which included the U-boats U-13, U-14, and U-15, was ordered on February 23, 1909. This marked a step toward creating more powerful coastal submarines perfectly suited for Baltic Sea operations and ambush tactics. These vessels were the result of the evolution of previous classes. The main focus was on improving maneuverability while surfaced, without attempting to reach a fleet speed of 21 knots. The main features of the type U-13 were a single hull design with a separate upper-outer hull, a flat deck for stability in heavy weather, and large surrounding ballast tanks. This improved handling in port and submerged characteristics. For propulsion on the surface, they used cording kerosene engines with a total output of 1,200 horsepower. When submerged, electric motors providing 1,160 horsepower were used. At this transitional stage, even before the advent of diesels, the priority was power output rather than fuel economy. Designed primarily for coastal defense and short-range operations in confined waters like the Baltic Sea, this class supported an ambush strategy rather than open ocean raids. Each submarine cost about 2,101,000 gold marks, reflecting the experimental nature of the program. Construction was entrusted to the Imperial Shipyard in Danzig. All 3 boats were built one after another at the same shipyard. This clearly demonstrates the small-scale, almost artisanal production characteristic of German U-boat construction before the outbreak of the war. This class was also the last to use kerosene engines. Starting with the subsequent Type U-19, the Navy permanently switched to diesel engines. They lacked the dangerous fumes and thick exhaust smoke that made the courting engine boats quite easy to spot when surfaced. Compared to the previous Type U-13 class, the U-13 U-boats offered significant improvements. They were longer, at nearly 190 feet compared to 168, and faster on the surface, reaching a surface speed of 14.8 knots instead of 11.8. Their range increased to 4,000 nautical miles at a speed of 9 knots, and their maximum diving depth was 164 feet. The armament remained similar, consisting of 6 torpedoes and 4 torpedo tubes, 2 forward and 2 aft, but with enhanced capabilities for sustained combat. The U-boat U-14 was ordered on February 23, 1909, as part of the German Empire's early submarine program. Construction was assigned to the Kaiserliche Werft shipyard in Danzig. The keel was laid down in late 1910. This marked the start of the assembly for the Type U-13 coastal U-boat, which incorporated lessons learned from earlier designs like the U-9 class. Work progressed steadily, with the main focus on the compact pressure hull and internal systems. For this project, the Navy opted for more reliable kerosene engines instead of the earlier gasoline ones, reducing the risk of fire. On July 11, 1911, the U-boat was ceremonially launched, after which the fitting out phase began. It was equipped with two cording kerosene engines, a 6-cylinder and an 8-cylinder two-stroke model. Together, they produced 1,200 horsepower for surface running. For submerged operation, two Siemens Schuckert electric motors were used, providing 1,160 horsepower. Simultaneously, the armament was installed. This included 4 18-inch torpedo tubes, 6 C-06 torpedoes, and one 4-inch deck gun with 300 rounds of ammunition. The fitting out concluded with the integration of electrical and control systems, preparing the boat for sea trials. On April 24, 1912, U-14 was officially commissioned into the fleet. Immediately after, the first voyages began in the Baltic Sea to test stability and system operations under real conditions. The sea trials confirmed a maximum surface speed of 14.8 knots, proving the boat was ready for coastal reconnaissance, although they did reveal the need for minor adjustments to engine synchronization. After commissioning, U-14 entered peacetime service. The boat was assigned to regular training with the High Seas Fleet. The primary goal was to train the crew in submerged navigation and tactical maneuvers. During short deployments in the Baltic Sea, the Type U-13 U-boats practiced torpedo attacks and tested the reliability of their kerosene engines. The crew of 35 officers and sailors participated in large-scale exercises where the U-boats coordinated with surface ships. This period passed without major incidents, and minor upgrades to the propulsion system resolved initial reliability issues. During the pre-war period, U-14 served in the U-boat division of the High Seas Fleet. At that time, the first flotillas were just developing tactics for the new submarine fleet, which was intended to act as a reconnaissance force. On the eve of mobilization in July 1914, U-14 underwent a minor refit to ensure full combat readiness. By the summer of 1914, the U-14 U-boat was fully prepared for combat missions. Its crew consisted of 35 officers and sailors. On board were 6 torpedoes and enough supplies to cover 4,000 nautical miles while surfaced. With the start of World War I on August 1, 1914, U-14 joined the 2nd U-boat flotilla. It operated from a forward base in the Heligoland Bight, providing defense for the High Seas Fleet in the North Sea. From August 1st to December 15, 1914, under the command of Captain Lieutenant Walter Schwieger, the submarine participated in defensive operations. The primary mission was patrolling assigned sectors and guarding against potential attacks by the British fleet. The crew focused on reconnaissance and safeguarding the approaches to the German coast, though no actual combat patrols were conducted during this period. Even before commencing this routine patrol, on August 1st, U-14 departed for sea along with other U-boats. Their objective was the British naval base at Scapa Flow, but this sortie yielded no results. The fate of 2 other submarines proved far more tragic. U-13 vanished without a trace near the German coast a few days later, while U-15 was rammed and sunk with all hands by the British light cruiser Birmingham on August 9, 1914. Walter Schwieger's brief tenure commanding U-14 is notable for another detail. In December 1914, he relinquished command and took charge of the U-boat U-20. He was the officer who torpedoed the passenger liner Lusitania off the coast of Ireland on May 7, 1915. Nearly 1,200 people perished, and this tragedy became a significant factor contributing to the United States' entry into the war. On December 17th, command transferred to Captain Lieutenant Otto Droscher, who led U-14 until April 15, 1915. Under his command, the submarine's responsibilities expanded. These now included extensive reconnaissance in the North Sea, as well as gathering weather data to support fleet and aircraft operations. Otto Droscher arrived at U-14 with his own solid reputation. Commanding the U-boat U-20 from August to December 1914, he became the first German submariner to complete a circumnavigation of the British Isles. This lengthy patrol demonstrated to skeptics that submarines were capable of operating far beyond short coastal missions. Resupply and repair operations were conducted in nearby ports such as Wilhelmshaven. To maintain the flotilla's combat readiness on its demanding schedule, the crew was rotated periodically. Strategically, These early missions aided Germany in establishing a distant blockade utilizing its submarine fleet. Concurrently, the crew had to adhere to strict restrictions, for instance, not venturing north of the 59th parallel. Without full-scale attacks on merchant shipping, their successes remained rather modest. Prior to its next deployment, on the night of February 1st to 2nd, 1915, U-14 sustained damage during a British air raid on Zeebrugge. Bombs struck the submarine, leading to flooding. This necessitated urgent repairs and delayed the boat's return to active service. On April 16, 1915, First Lieutenant Max Hammerle assumed command. Under his leadership, the U-boat departed from the German-occupied base in Belgian Zeebrugge and embarked on its sole war patrol, which lasted until June 5, 1915. It crossed the North Sea to the coast of Scotland, reaching waters off Peterhead in early June. By that time, U-14 had already been assigned to the 1st U-boat flotilla. The U-boat U-14's first combat encounter occurred on June 2, 1915. On that day, she torpedoed and sank the Danish steamer Cyrus in the North Sea off the coast of Scotland. The following day, June 3rd, the U-boat engaged the Swedish steamer Lapland. After missing with her initial torpedo, U-14 surfaced and destroyed the vessel using her deck gun. These actions marked the U-boat's initial successes during her patrol, targeting neutral merchant ships. On June 5th, approximately 20 miles east of the Scottish town of Peterhead, U-14 suddenly came under fire while surfaced. The attack came from two British armed trawlers, Oceanic II and Hawk. The submarine was crippled and sank. One crew member was killed, while 27 sailors were rescued and taken prisoner. On that same June 5th, while patrolling the North Sea near Peterhead, U-14 encountered the British trawler Oceanic II. The U-boat, under the command of Oberleutnant Max Hammerle, surfaced and opened fire on the trawler. This British vessel was operating undercover as part of an auxiliary patrol to protect fishing fleets from U-boat attacks. Equipped with a hidden gun, Oceanic II immediately returned fire, starting a fierce, close-range gun duel. The armed trawler Hawk, commanded by Lieutenant Henry John Ferguson, quickly arrived to provide support after receiving a distress signal. The two trawlers launched a joint attack using their deck guns and small arms, aiming at the exposed conning tower and hull of U-14. Multiple hits stripped the U-boat of her ability to submerge. Damage to critical components, such as vent valves and forward ballast tanks, led to partial flooding. The stern went underwater, while the bow remained on the surface. Hammerle gave the order for the crew to abandon ship. However, the intense gunfire continued for about 20 minutes before Hawk moved in to ram the vulnerable submarine. Ultimately, U-14 sank stern first, marking one of the earliest successes for armed trawlers against German U-boats in home waters. This battle demonstrated the effectiveness of decoy tactics, where seemingly defenseless fishing vessels drew surface submarines into gun duels. Oceanic II and Hawk were operating as part of the broader Royal Navy Auxiliary Patrol. This system relied on requisitioned fishing trawlers and drifters, manned primarily by reservist fishermen. The hidden gun tactics used against U-14 became an early predecessor to the more sophisticated decoy ship program, which the British Admiralty expanded between 1915 and 1917. Under this program, not only trawlers but also disguised colliers, cargo steamers, and sailing ships were fitted with concealed weapons to lure U-boats into close range before opening fire. During the sinking of the submarine on June 5, 1915, the commander, Oberleutnant Max Hammerle, was killed. He was the only casualty among the crew. Out of the U-boat's 28 crew members, 27 survived, including 6 officers and 21 sailors. Immediately following the battle, the survivors were pulled from the water by the crews of the British armed trawlers Oceanic II and Hawk. After their rescue, the German sailors were interrogated by Royal Navy personnel to gather intelligence on U-boat operations. They were then transferred to prisoner of war camps in Britain, where they remained until the end of the war. British authorities confirmed that the sunken vessel is the U-boat U-14. They figured this out from markings on debris recovered from the wreck site. No salvage operations were carried out. Most likely, this was due to the depth and the more pressing tasks of the naval blockade. Right now, The hull sits upright on the seabed east of the Scottish town of Peterhead at a depth of about 131 feet. Modern archaeologists have not dived there, and the site does not have memorial status. U-14 was a coastal U-boat of the type U-13 class, built for the Imperial German Navy. It featured a single hull steel design with an outer casing specifically tailored for relatively shallow water operations in the North Sea. Surfaced, the U-boat had a displacement of 569 tons, and submerged it displaced 710 tons. Its length was about 190 feet, with a beam of 20 feet and a draft of 11 feet. The maximum diving depth was 164 feet, which was perfect for operating near the coast. The crew consisted of 35 officers and enlisted men, allowing them to effectively manage all systems on patrol. For surface rescue in an emergency, a small boat was stowed on the superstructure. This was a standard safety requirement for German U-boats in the early 20th century. The armament of U-boat 14 consisted of 4 18-inch torpedo tubes, 2 in the bow and 2 in the stern. The torpedo load included 6 torpedoes. Additionally, a 4.1-inch SKL-45 deck gun was mounted, with a supply of 300 rounds for surface combat against smaller vessels. The U-boat used Type C-06 torpedoes. This was a pre-war design about 16 feet long with a steam gas engine. Later on the front lines, they were replaced by the better G6 model, but older Type U-13 class boats like U-boat 14 kept firing the old stockpile until 1915. U-boat 14 ran on a kerosene electric system typical for early German U-boats. On the surface, it was powered by 4 cording semi-diesel engines producing a total of 1,200 horsepower. Submerged, 2 Siemens Schuckert Work electric motors kicked in, putting out 1,160 horsepower. This whole system turned 2 propeller shafts. The kerosene engines were reliable over short distances, but had a major drawback. Compared to later diesel power plants, there was a high risk of fuel vapors catching fire. This kept them from running at top speed for very long. During sea trials in 1912, U-boat 14 reached a surface speed of 14.8 knots and a submerged speed of 10.7 knots. Thanks to better engines, it outran older models like the U-9 class. Its cruising range was limited by fuel capacity and battery life. Surfaced, the U-boat could cover about 4,000 nautical miles at a speed of 9 knots, or 2,000 nautical miles at 14 knots. Submerged, the batteries lasted for roughly 90 nautical miles at a speed of 5 knots. The fuel supply was 71 tons of kerosene and paraffin oil. They kept it in special tanks for the surface engines. For running submerged, they used 2 banks of lead-acid batteries. These were charged by generators while running on the surface. This setup gave them some freedom to operate in coastal waters, but it had a massive problem. The U-boat had to surface frequently to recharge, which made it vulnerable in combat zones. On top of that, due to its low freeboard and design quirks, U-boat 14 was highly unstable during North Sea storms. The crew often had to throttle back or maneuver carefully while out on patrol. During its single wartime patrol in 1915, submarine U-boat 14 sank 2 neutral merchant vessels totaling 3,907 tons. These attacks happened off the Scottish coast in the North Sea. The targets were unarmed steamers sailing between neutral ports, and neither vessel put up a fight. On June 2, 1915, U-boat 14 torpedoed the Danish steamer Cyrus, about 50 miles east of Scotland. The steamer was carrying coal from Scotland to Denmark when it was attacked without warning. All 20 crew members escaped in lifeboats and were later rescued by passing ships. There were no casualties. This was the first confirmed merchant sinking by U-boat 14, done efficiently with a single torpedo to save ammunition. The next day, June 3, 1915, the submarine attacked the Swedish steamer Lapland. The ship was transporting iron ore from Norway to England when it was struck by a torpedo. All 22 crew members survived with minimal injuries. The ship captain, J.C. Pedersen, reported they had no chance to resist because the attack happened so fast. These actions showed the tactical flexibility of U-boat 14. It used torpedoes to overcome the limited ammunition of the early Type 13 submarines, which carried only 6 torpedoes and a small number of artillery shells. As an early coastal submarine of the Imperial German Navy, U-14 played a role in the start of unrestricted submarine warfare. This was part of Germany's effort to economically cut off Britain by attacking merchant shipping in the North Sea. Under the command of Max Hammerle between April and June 1915, the submarine sank 2 vessels. This commerce raiding put pressure on British supply lines, even if it didn't deliver immediate strategic victories. Germany had declared the waters around Great Britain and Ireland a war zone earlier that year, meaning merchant ships, even neutral ones, could be attacked without warning. While the submarine only sank 2 ships, the broader 1915 campaign destroyed over 750 vessels, totaling about 1 million tons. This proved that the Type 13 class was useful for short-range North Sea operations, despite their fragile design and limited endurance. By targeting neutral ships, the strategy made it harder for Britain to import goods, although it also caused international outrage and diplomatic tensions, especially with the United States. On June 5, 1915, U-14 was sunk by gunfire from the armed British trawlers Oceanic II and Hawk, which were acting as decoys. This exposed the critical vulnerabilities of surface submarines against improvised armed ships. It influenced later British decoy tactics and taught Germany about the dangers of cautious approaches. With 1 crew member killed and 27 survivors rescued, the sinking highlighted the extreme risks of early patrols. This led to a shift toward unrestricted attacks without warning to keep submarines safely hidden. Submarine U-14 had only 1 combat patrol and very modest success. This contrasted sharply with the achievements of other U-boats in the 1st and 2nd flotillas. For example, U-9, under the command of Otto Weddigen, sank 3 British cruisers with a total displacement of over 36,000 long tons in a single battle in September 1914. The history of U-14 showed that the small submarines of that era were better suited for reconnaissance and auxiliary tasks than for decisive naval battles. After the war, experts evaluated the actions of U-14 and concluded that this U-boat helped the German Navy shift from pre-war reconnaissance tactics to the aggressive destruction of merchant vessels. However, its rapid loss proved that the fleet critically needed better protection from surface ships, larger ocean-going submarines, and new tactics. These exact lessons shaped the massive U-boat campaigns from 1916 to 1918. None of the 3 Type U-13 submarines survived the first year of the war. U-13 went missing a few days after heading to Scapa Flow in August 1914. U-15 was rammed and sunk on its 9th day, and U-14, which served the longest of the trio, was lost after roughly 10 months of active duty. During this time, it managed to take part in fleet cover operations and carry out its single fatal combat patrol. The short service of these boats showed both the potential and the vulnerability of the first generation of German coastal U-boats. The experience gained by the crews of these submarines paved the way for larger, long-range diesel submarines that dominated the ocean in the later stages of the war.